Okay, brother.
Good evening, all.
Good.
Welcome to the
Should I introduce
56th
myself?
session of. I'll do
All right.
I'll do the
Good
honors.
afternoon.
I'll do the honors.
Good
A
after.
very good evening to
Good
all of you.
afternoon.
Good
A
afternoon
very
from
good evening
Nigeria.
from Nigeria. Mr. Olusegun Said
Absolutely,
on the air.
absolutely.
I've been a teacher since the year 1995. That's almost 25 years now. So my topic of discourse this afternoon is titled "The Nigeria Education System." Why do we choose it?
Before we jump
Because
into the
I'm
session, sir. Sorry, before we jump into the session, sir, I thought I'll just set a little bit of context for people who have joined us this evening, and then after that we can get started. Is what I was
okay.
thinking.
All
So
all
yeah,
right.
so for the benefit of everyone who's joined us this evening, today's session, the reason for doing today's session was, of course, as you know, this is the 56th session of this webinar series, and we've been continuing, we've been doing sessions regularly since the lockdown began. So one of the things which came up, or one of the requests which came from a lot of teachers was that they would want to get insight into um, uh, education systems across, not just, of course, not just in India, but also from across the globe. And so it's been a constant endeavor to find people, or find topics which could could be aligned to that theme. So interestingly, what happened is I was the facilitator for today, Mr. Olusegun Sahid. He is a my center community member, and he's been regularly attending all our sessions since the lockdown began. And so one fine day I was just looking at, I was just searching through some names to see what we could do, and his name suddenly popped up on the screen. So and I checked his profile, and he's a teacher, as he said, with out to sir to see if he'll be willing to do this session, if he'll be willing to share his knowledge, or and share insights, more importantly, into the education system of his country, which is Nigeria. So that's the and just I texted him one day, and he was very gracious to accept the invite, and do the session. And so here we are today. And as the topic, I mean, as you already know, over the course of the next 40 to 45 minutes, we will explore the various we won't, of course, be able to go into the details, but we'll try and get some surface level view of how the education system in Nigeria how this how the system in Nigeria, how is it hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. Can I go on with the
Yes,
section
yes,
now?
yes,
So, okay.
yes.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Olusegun Said. I've been a teacher here in Nigeria since the year 1995. That's going to about 25 years of working experience as a teacher. Similarly, I'm a member of this center, the Center for Teacher Accreditation. Uh, just last year, I joined this association last year during the pandemic period. So, and I've been a regular listener to the sessions. So, and I was told that I have to pick up a topic of discourse since I'm being a regular attendant. So, me and the coordinator here at the center here said, as he choose a topic, and we agreed that I have to discuss Nigerian education system. So in this topic, Nigerian education system, I'm going to section it into sections two. One section will be on traditional education system in Nigeria. Also, I have an Islamic system of education in Nigeria, because basically we have two religions practice in Nigeria. We have the Christianity and the Islamic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Islamic practice or the Islamic system of education here in Nigeria. Also, I'm going to pick up some discourse on the advent of the Western education system in Nigeria. That is, the coming in, how the Europeans, how they come in, how the missionaries, how they come into our country by establishing churches. Along the way, while they are establishing churches, schools are being created along with it. So that is why we pick up that topic on the advent of Western education in Nigeria. Whenever I mean the Western education, I mean how the Europeans, how they emerges in the country and start establishing schools. Because majority of the schools that we are that were established by these missionaries gave us the opportunity, like someone like me too, I went to a missionary school. So it has really assisted us here in this our country when the missionaries, when they start coming into our country in establishing some of those schools. Then lastly, I'm going to pick up the development of education in Nigeria in the year 1919. That was when Nigeria itself, a country, was created. Nigeria was under a colony or under a colony of a British administration as at the year 1990, which I'm going to. So we are going to talk a little bit about some of those history. So I think first and foremost, let's start on that issue of the traditional education system in Nigeria. So the traditional education system in Nigeria is a lifelong in nature, as it aims at equipping individuals with the necessary skills and attitude that will help them function effectively in the society. So this system has been and is still effective in providing functional training and experiences in artistry, farming, fishing, and other vocational skills, which are needed for the survival of the society. The realistic nature of the traditional system of education is contained in its advocacy for the acquisition of the right types of values, attitudes, and morals in order for the society to be tranquil and peaceful for all to enjoy living in. So every responsible member of the society serves as a transmitter and teacher and a trainer of the societal norms and skills to the younger generations. They are looked upon as models of good virtues to be emulated by the young ones. The belief among a cross-section of the elite community that the traditional system of education is rigidly rooted in an informal ways of training is, to say the least, very unfair. So the system has a clearly demarcated learning experiences for each age grade, which culminates into the acquisition of desired values and attitude, and the specialization of individuals in some specific crafts or vocations. There are the farmers, the medicine men, the fishermen, warriors, carpenters, orators, spiritualists, weavers, carvers, among others, who are tested to be highly skilled in their different callings. So that is just a simple explanation of that traditional education system. But we have the processes. There are processes that are involved in these traditional systems. Among those processes are to develop the
Just to recap
child's
what
latent
sir
physical
said,
skills.
just 1 second. So for benefit of those who've joined just now, just to recap what sir was saying is He's going to split the session into 4 parts. In the first part, he's going to focus on the traditional education system of Nigeria. In the second part, he will talk about the Islamic system of education, which has played a massive role in the country. After that, he's going to come to Western education, the advent of Western education, how it was brought about through the intervention of missionaries, and at last he's going to 1919 was actually a landmark year in the history of Nigeria, because that was the year in which the country was created. So in that, he's going to focus on the fourth part of the session is going to focus on that. Now, because we picked up the traditional education system first, net what sir was saying is, like other traditional systems across the world, the focus of, and also in many other African societies, the focus of this traditional system of education, which was there in Nigeria, was to equip individuals with the skills and attitudes which could help them to function well in a society, and also live peacefully, more importantly. So and it provided and focused on providing like vocational training, like as I was saying, for fishermen, for farmers, for artisans of different kinds. So that was the primary focus of the traditional system of education in Nigeria societies. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I said we are trying to analyze the processes of traditional system of education. This traditional system of education, it differs significantly from the Western type of education in the process of transmitting the knowledge, attitude, and the skills itself. These differences is largely accounted for by the purposes each serves. The latent aim of a traditional system of education, as observed by one of our professors here in Nigeria, in person of Professor Fafuwa in the year 1994, provide the basis and the processes of training in the traditional educational system. And this process involves, one, to develop the child's latent physical skills; two, to develop character; three, to inculcate respect for elders and those in positions of authority; fourth, to develop intellectual skills; to acquire specific vocational training; and to develop a healthy attitude towards honest labor. And the sixth point is to develop a sense of belonging and to participate actively in family and community affairs. And lastly, to understand, appreciate, and promote the cultural heritage of the community at large. So this means this process employed to attain the goals that I've mentioned above is mostly through a combination of theory and practice. So children learn the history of great men and women from folklore and stories narrated by the elderly members of the societies. Good virtues such as value, honesty, wisdom, respect for elders, and honesty are either directly or indirectly impacted from these stories. The vocational training starts right from the earliest stage of children's life when they begin to follow their parents to the farms, rivers, forests, blacksmithing, and weaving shops to learn the occupations of their forefathers. Basically, there are four processes through which cultural heritages are transmitted from generation to generation in a typical traditional setup. And these are indoctrination, imitation, training, and good virtues values are handed down to the children through the different means possible. They are
Sure.
dogmas that cannot be compromised or questioned. Limitations are children learn the skills and norms by copying what they see their elders do. And training involves children receiving informal training to acquire skills, attitude, and values that will make them fit to live in the society equally through the apprenticeship system. And lastly, the initiation is after the children have received the training, they are now introduced to certain modes of behavior that are considered acceptable by the group they belong to. This is usually marked by a fanfare and ceremony at an appointed time in the community. Cultural rites and practices are usually observed during such initiation.
Sure.
So in the foregoing discussion, we have learned that never had the people existed the world over without a form of training to prepare their children for life. So in the medieval age, man has learned to manipulate his environment in which he lives for his benefits. And because man did not live in isolation, his action, behavior, and competencies were inculcated in him by his immediate family members and the extended members of the society. So this system of training, which are considered rigid and informal by some elites, were observed to be purposeful and comprehensive, serving the purpose it was meant for at that particular time. And the training of the young ones, which starts before useful age, was a collective responsibility of the community and was carried out in stages according to age variation as observed by different scholars. This system was not based on any formalized structure, but carefully pursued towards realizing the latent aims of the community. Just as the man have stated, Professor Fahua, he listed the 7 cardinal goals of traditional education, and a careful analysis of these goals revealed their relevances then, now, and even for generations to come.
So,
Perhaps
so
this is the
I'll just try
reason.
to recap what Sir said here. So,
Yeah.
as we all noted in the last a few minutes back, that the traditional
Yes.
system in was in African societies was quite similar, because it focused on enabling individuals with equipping them with the attitudes and skills that are required to function effectively as human beings in a society, and also maintain peace. So this system it focused on how the traditional system of education in Nigeria. It's different from the Western system of education, which came into practice much later. And
Yeah.
the traditional system, of course, tries to build what do we say, the skills such as the latent physical skills of a child. It tries to develop the character of the child. It tries to develop a respect for elders and those in a position of authority. It tries to provide them, as I said, vocational training, so that they can work as as in earlier societies, work effectively as farmers, artisans, painters, all those things. So that was always the focus of the traditional education, and it started, and as Sir said, there was demarcation across age groups. So it was clearly that kids within this age group would learn this, kids of a higher age group are going to learn this. So that's how they had a set pattern, a set theme of what children across ages should learn, and also what's important to note here is this education began, as Elsa said, at quite an early age. Children could watch or hear rather stories from their grandparents about about uh, uh, about the different values that they should be inculcating in themselves, and it was always a combination of their family and of the skills that they were that were passed on to them by elders in the society, as fishermen or as farmers or painters or as artisans or anything. So that's how the education traditional education system got passed on, as Mr. was talking about. Yeah.
So now, we can now go straight to the next one, which is on the Islamic system of education here in Nigeria. And the issue of this Islamic education here in Nigeria cannot be complete without recasting our minds. The general attitude of people here in this country towards it, on the impact it had made on the world at large. So the Islamic education generally, it started with first Quranic revelation to the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, so to call. Yeah, and the first 5 verses reveal contain clear directives to him and the rest of the Muslims to pursue the cause of knowledge, signifying the religion is solidly rooted in the pursuit of knowledge. And the verses in the question are as follows: in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Read, in the name of your Lord who created man from congealed blood. Read, and your Lord is the most great, who teaches man the use of pen, teaches man when he knew not. This can be found in Quranic chapter 96, verses 1 to 5. So these above verses illuminated the world, which was hitherto groping in darkness and santerling in the shackles of ignorance. So the virtue of knowledge is extolled, and the power of the pen for its documentation and preservation is clearly pointed out. Since then, the Muslims have been working relentlessly to establish themselves as patrons or custodians of knowledge. The tremendous achievements recorded in the fields of architecture, history, medicine, philosophy, and other branches of liberal and natural sciences were credited to the period of the reign of the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, who ruled in the 3rd century after the Hijrah. The scientific and technological breakthrough of the modern world owe a lot to the researches conducted by the great scholars of Islam. Centers of learning in Basra, Kufa, Baghdad, and elsewhere in Europe, particularly Cordova, which began from mosques as religious centers, developed into full-fledged centers of higher learning and universities, from where a great number of Muslim scholars emerges. Notably among them were Averroes, who was responsible for the development of Aristotle's philosophy, which made a clean distinction between religious and scientific truths. His achievement in the area of philosophical discourse paved the way for the liberation of scientific research from the theological dogmatism that was prevalent in churches and mosques. Others like Mohammed Musa, the mathematician responsible for the introduction of decimal notation and assigning digits the value of position, Avicenna, the physician, and the other Arab scholars spearheaded the introduction of geometry and the development of spherical trigonometry, particularly the sine, tangents, and cotangents. In the
Sure.
field of physics, to say at least, the Muslim Arabs discovered the pendulum and
Sure.
were able
So,
to
so just
advance
to
the world knowledge. Okay, okay, yeah,
put a recap, just to recap what we just shared, and also I think in
yeah,
the interest of time, I think we should move on to how Islamic education spread in northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria. But for everyone
right,
here
right.
who's just joined us now, we have discussed
Mm,
about the traditional system of education in African societies and also specifically Nigeria, and also we touched upon briefly how the traditional systems are different from the Western system of education that came into Nigeria much later. But another very important component, as sir was saying, is of the education system in Nigeria. When we talk about the education system in Nigeria, is the Islamic system of education, because Islam is a very prominent religion in Nigeria, and so the advent of Islamic system of education in Nigeria started off, of course, the context or the background sir was giving was about the overall, the contributions made by Islamic scholars in other parts of the world, and how that set the base for knowledge to be transferred, from the Arab nations, from Arab, it came through Arab merchants, as sir will tell in the next session. So how that knowledge was transferred from Arabs to the Nigerians. So that was the context that sir was setting, that about the developments that took place in the Islamic world, about related to scientific thinking. In scriptures and all of that. So that was the context that sir was setting about.
okay.
And I think he's now going to move into the specifics of the Islamic system of education in Nigeria and how it
So
how it was brought about.
this,
Yeah.
basically we have in this Islamic system of practice, because I've already told you that the country Nigeria during the Lord Lugard season, that
Mm-hmm.
is in the year 1914, we have the northern part of the country and we have the southern part of the country. So prior, before our independence in the year 1960, these are what is actually happening in the northern part of the country in regards to that Islamic practice. So the legacy bequeathed to mankind through the divine precepts and the effects and the efforts of the early Muslim scholars were the major reasons for the development of this Islamic system of education in the north, which were observed. There were many scholars in Borno. This Borno is located in the northeast part of the country.
Sure.
Borno, that's it.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, there were scholars in the Borno almost in 1,000 years ago, and I said the Borno is located just by the northern east part of the country. The trend in the spread of that Islamic education is similar to that of North Africa and the Western Sudan. North Africa and Western Sudan, we are trying to referring to the African nation as well, because majority of these northerners, they migrated from the northern Africa down to our country. So the Arab traders poured into these savannah regions. I mean, the savannah regions are located in that northern part of the country, which included the northern part of Nigeria as earlier as the first half of the 18th century. So they gradually moved into the interior until they reached the Kanem area in the 11th century. The king of Kanem, Umayya, Gilmi. This is for the year 1865 to 1097, embraced Islam and became zealous of the Islamic learning, a course that he pursued until his death in the year 1097. So the successive rulers sustained the temple of Islamization through Islamic education in the Kanem after Gilmi. They pursued Islamic education and established strong ties with the West African states. So this relationship facilitated the pursuit of further learning abroad. So the kingdom of Kanem expanded later to include Borno, which became the seat of rule and a center of learning. So between Kanem and the Songhai Empire, observed Ozigi led the Hausa states comprising of Katsina. So this northern country consists of the following states: Katsina, Kano, Daura, Zamfara, Kebbi, and Zazu. So the rulers of this area became influenced by their trading contacts with the North Africans and converted to Islam. So the Islamic practices were mixed with the traditional forms of worship. In other words, spirit worship by rulers who saw it as a potent source of power over their people. This was the initial problem that was set by the Muslim cleric against the rulers, and thus provided strong basis for the series of jihad, that is holy wars, waged in the Western Sudan, which aimed at purging the area of un-Islamic practice. The jihad of Shehu Usman Dan Fodio in the Sokoto Caliphate was one such religious war fought to rid the area of the heartening practice and excessive of the Hausa ruler. So this Hausa ruler, this one has for the Islamic system in the north. Now we are going straight to the Islamic system of education in the southern Nigeria.
So I'll just recap it for the attendees. Just 1 second before we step into southern Nigeria. I'll just recap what Sir said about northern Nigeria. And as we had said earlier, in 1919, when Nigeria became a country, the two parts of Nigeria, northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria, and the advent of Islamic system of education started first with northern Nigeria, and the spread is very similar to what happened in, say, Sudan, for example. And it happened through the Arab merchants who first came in contact with a kingdom called Kanem, the king of Kanem at that time, he was very impressed by the system of learning that was presented, the Islamic system of learning that was brought in by the merchants from Arab nations, and he took over the practice, and he also widely started to push it in his kingdom, and that's where the spread of Islamic system of education in northern Nigeria began. And And it's also, this the system, as was the case, as we could see in different countries at the time around the world. There was a close connection between, the system of education and also the role of clerics in it, and that also, that led to certain complications which we would come to later in the session. But that's net. That's a quick recap of what Sir just mentioned about the spread of how the Islamic system of education spread in northern Nigeria. Now we are just going to jump quickly into southern Nigeria.
Yes. So now we are into the Islamic practice in the southern Nigeria now. So this southern part of Nigeria is particularly dominated by the Yorubas. That is, it is called the Yoruba land and was
Yeah.
known to Muslims long before Islam actually reached there. So history has it that there was the presence of Islam in the south long before the jihad of Sheikh Usman Danfodio of the north. As contact began to increase between the Yorubas and the Muslim scholars, the former started embracing Islam while at the same time learning the rudiments of the religion through the study of Quran, Hadith, and the Sharia, that is the Islamic law. This saw the emergence of notable Islamic scholars in the south with their initial base in Ilorin, that's middle part of the country. This Ilorin is just a middle part of Nigeria. So according to a professor of Afuwa, Usman bin Abu Bakr was a learned scholar who hailed from Katsina up north, a seat of Islamic learning at that time, and had settled down at Borno, not eastern part of the country, and wanted to teach and preach Islam in the south. He was eventually made imam of the Ibadan Muslim, one of Ibadan is one of the capital city in in Nigeria. So Ibadan later transformed into a formidable center of learning to pair with Ilorin, that is the middle part of the country, down to the south. So scholars of eminence were produced and they made their marks in the development of Islamic education in the south. Such scholars included, among others, Sheikh Abu Bakr bin Al-Kazim, Sheikh Aaron, whose contributions to the propagation of Islam in the South was monumental and unparalleled. Soon, the religion spread, and Quranic schools sprang in towns and villages with Ibadan and Ilorin as the main center of higher learning. Ibadan, Ilorin, those two cities are major cities where these Islamic practice are much rampant. So
Sure.
I think with that now, we have have explained the Islamic practice in North. So I think we need to
Sure.
elaborate on the stages of learning.
Sure. Just before we
Stages
get to
of
that, sir,
learning.
I'll just
Yes,
quickly
sir.
recap what we discussed in the southern, the advent of Islamic system of education into southern parts of Nigeria. We've already discussed what happened in the north. So, as I was saying, southern Nigeria, or it's called the land of Yorubas. That land was actually known to Muslims before even people from the northern parts of Nigeria who had this mission to spread Islam to southern parts of Nigeria before they even came there. So that part of the world was already known to Arab traders, and that's where it's called the Yoruba land, and that's and that's where the spread actually started from. And in northern Nigeria, it was Borno, and in southern Nigeria, the center of Islamic education became a place called Ilorin. So that's something that you could keep in mind. So so I think that brings us to a close of of this particular part of the session, which is the Islamic system of education, and we can move on to the next part, sir.
Okay, I think maybe we can go straight now to the advanced. Though I will have said we talk about the learning system, which involves the nursery and the early childhood. This is referred to as the makaranta. Then we have what we call the elementary stage and the adult stage. That is a normal educational practice anywhere. We have the earlier childhood stage in In the earlier childhood stage, this is called the makaranta. The elementary stage is called the taitibiwi, and finally the adult stages. So there are basically three stages of learning in that Islamic practice: the early childhood stage, elementary stage, and the adult stage. So I think the next way I can now say we should talk briefly about the advent of Western education, which I think is the most common educational practice globally. Elsewhere, this is applicable, the coming of Western education to Nigeria. Just as earlier on says, the Western education coming to Nigeria through the missionaries. Missionaries coming to our country. I think we learned this in the history of Nigeria. Our missionaries who took in from the European countries. Because the country itself, before we gained our independence in the year 1990, we were still under the colony of the British. So the aim of these missionaries who brought Western education itself to Nigeria was almost similar to the Muslim Arabs that brought Islamic education into northern Nigeria centuries before. So the only initial difference one might notice was the desire for economic activities by the Arabs. So the Christian missionaries, on the other hand, avowed. So according to Alloy, that's an alloy, it liberated the dark minds of the African from barbarism and adulteries. The economic and political factor came much later. So practically, the history of Western education in Nigeria was traceable to the Portuguese traders who came into Benin. Benin is in the southern part of the country, in the earlier part of the 15th century. Then they taught the children of the Oba of Benin. However, no meaningful development of Western education, which was not accepted, took root until late 18th and early 19th centuries. However, the history meaningfully, Western education in Nigeria can be traceable to the activities of the Christian missionaries who started in the year 1842. Accounts of this historical event were given by numerous educationalists, among which were Taiwo, Adeshina. Taiwo was in the year 1990, Adeshina 1988, Fajino, Pafua, etc., etc. So the mission responsible for the introduction of Western education in Nigeria was the Wesley Methodist Society, which opened the Christian mission station at Badagry, near Lagos. And the activities of this society were facilitated by the ex-slave of Yoruba race by name Ferguson, who had earlier returned to the area. It was him that succeeded in persuading the Yoruba chief to bring the missionaries from Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is one of the West African countries into Badagry, and Badagry is a town here in Nigeria. This effort saw the coming of Thomas Batch Freeman and Mr. and Mrs. De Graft in September 1842 under the auspices of the Wesley Methodist Society to establish the first ever Christian mission station in the area. So we should note, as mentioned above, that prior to that time, as early as 1472, there were pockets of literary activities going around the palaces of Obas of Benin, who had engaged the Portuguese Catholic missionaries in the training of their sons and the sons of their chiefs.
Before you move on, sir, I'll just try to recap what we just covered in this section. So, the first, for those who've joined us just now, in the beginning, we covered what we call the traditional system of education in Nigeria and other African societies, and then we moved on to another massive system of education, which is massively prevalent, which is called the Islamic system of education, and how it was brought into northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria. The next part is, of course, as you all know, is focusing on the advent of Western education in Nigeria, and it's the advent of Western education, it was very similar to how the advent of the Islamic education came about centuries earlier. But while the Islamic system of education was brought about by Arab traders who had a very and explicitly an economic purpose in mind, the Western education was brought in by, as was the case in many countries across the world, including India, was through the Christian missionaries, and the Christian missionaries, of course, the aim or which this system of education, or the new system of education, or the Western system of education, as we call it, was brought about, was to evangelize the Nigerians and try and convert them into Christianity. So that was the aim with which this was brought about, and. While it was Borno in northern Nigeria for Islamic education, it was Ilorin in southern Nigeria for Islamic education. The same equivalent was Badagry which is a town in Nigeria, and that's where the growth of Western education in through missionaries began, and it and the massive or the most important role which was played in the spread was by the society called the or the sect of Christianity which was there in Nigeria, which was working in Nigeria, which was called the Wesleyan Methodist Society. So they were primarily responsible for the spread of the Western education in Nigeria, starting from Bagatri. So that was a quick recap of what Sir was talking about.
Okay, yeah. So the Catholic now, through the influence of the Portuguese traders, were the first missionaries to set foot on Nigerian soil, and they established. I mean, the Catholics. That's a class where a Catholic is a part of the Christian religion, an establishment of the Christian religion through the influence of the Portuguese. They are Portuguese that come to Nigerian soil, and they establish what we call a seminary on an island of Sao Tome off the coast of Nigeria as earlier as 1571 to train Africans as church priests and teachers. So from Sao Tome, they continue, they visited Warri, where they established schools and preached the gospel. So the effort of the Wesleyan Methodist societies was further consolidated by 3 missionaries of the Church Missionary Society that arrived Badagry, from where they later moved to Abeokuta, a town in the southern part of Nigeria. On the team were Reverend Samuel Ajayi Crowther, later become a bishop, Mr. Erin Townsend, and Mr. G.A. Coleman. So Samuel Ajayi Crowther settled at Igbeyin and established 2 schools, one for boys and other for girls, while Townsend settled in Ake, another part of the town in Abeokuta, where they built a mission house, a church, and a school. This was the beginning of real rivalry among the Christian missions in Nigeria. So the Methodists, who started the first evangelical work in Nigeria, did not take their news kindly, and so decided to send a layer of missionaries to Abeokuta to commence work there. As the Catholic Mission Society was consolidating its activities around Abeokuta and Badagry and extending its evangelical programs to other parts of the country, Samuel Ajayi Crowther opened the first school in Onitsha too. Onitsha is also one of the major towns or major cities in the southern part of Nigeria in December 1858 for girls between the ages of 6 and 10 years. Down Calabar and Bonny, these are found in the southern part of Nigeria. Development in the introduction of Western education by the Church Mission Society missionary were taking place. So the chiefs of the area were, however, not interested in the evangelical activities of the missionaries, but would rather want their children to be taught how to gauge palm oil and other mercantile businesses, as trading was the main interest of the people in such area. So the missionaries had no option but to accept the people's wishes. So the Presbyterian mission also made their presence known in 1846 and established Missions House. Another Baptist convention established itself at Ijayi, Abeokuta in 1853. The Society of the African Mission similarly arrived in Lagos and established their mission in 1865. Unfortunately, however, Each denomination emphasized its own importance and spared no pains at proving that one denomination was better than the other. As this denomination moved further into the era, they established schools for their training and for the training of their teachers.
Sure, sure. Just a quick recap of what Sir said. Of course, we just, a few minutes back, we just heard that, the advent of Western education was brought about by missionaries, and their aim was to evangelize and convert Nigerians into Christianity, and that's where the whole mission started. I saw a couple of questions about, the uh, about the girl child, about what's the status of girl child education in Nigeria, and of course that's something that we'll ask Sir after the sessions, in the next few minutes. But as a historical fact, the first girls' school in Nigeria was established, I think it was in 1858 by Ajay Crowther, and so that's where the system of education started, and so we spoke about Wesleyan Methodist Society. So there are other societies at work which started, coming to different parts of Nigeria, or going to different parts of Nigeria and setting up missions there and trying to educate people. But at the same time, as I was saying, they faced some issues. They faced resistance from the local public because because the inclination was still to go to the traditional systems of education, which were functional in nature, which provided kids a way to the skills or knowledge to do practical things, practical things in life, and earn a livelihood. So someone say wanted to collect oil from a palm tree, they wanted to tap palm tree, and that's what they wanted to learn. So ultimately, the missionaries, while of course they were on this mission to bring about a classical or the Western style of Western system of education in Nigeria, they also at some places had to give in to the local demands and try to incorporate the requests from the local community into into their curriculum. So that was a quick recap of what just said. So. We will, apologies, we'll share the feedback form. Just give me a second. I think we shared the registration form by mistake, and all of you have already registered for the session, so you need not fill in the registration form again. We'll share the feedback form with you. So you could continue in the meanwhile.
So I think now we can just talk briefly about the content features of the early mission schools.
Sure.
Early mission schools, which that is the coming in of the missionaries into the country in the establishment of the Western education. What were the features and the content? So the missions of these early missions schools were to evangelize and convert Nigerians into Christianity. They, however, believed that this was not possible except through what we call a formal educational processes that will enable the natives read and write. This was the basis upon which the need for the establishment of what we call a mission school was conceived and pursued vigorously alongside with their main aims and objectives. So at the established schools, children were expected to receive tuitions in English education at suitable age, be apprenticed in useful trades skills in gardening and agriculture. The most serious promising youths were considered for further education that could prepare them as school teachers in the interior ministries. So the curriculum and method of studies in the mission school are almost similar to that of the Quranic school that was observed earlier on in the Islamic system of education. Routine learning predominated, and the teacher taught practically everything from the one textbook, that is the Bible, like the Quran, as that was preached in the Islamic system, and they continued with the master textbook, and every subject, no matter how remote, had to be connected in some way with the holy rites. In addition to these contents, children receive formal training in writing, arithmetic, reading, and singing. So where there are where there were a lady teacher, the girls learned sewing. No tuitions were charged initially in missionary schools. Children who cared to come were welcome. Admissions were attracted by the missionaries through various means, which include door-to-door visits to persuade parents to send their children to schools. Some parents were existing parents from the missionary before allowing their wards to attend such schools. The parents established it a big sacrifice, allowing the children to attend school instead of the farm. So at a certain time, some stipend was suggested by the mission teachers for school children living at home as an inducement to make them regular at school. So immediately after this missionary system of education comes in, then we now have what we call a government intervention into the education. It is
Before we step into the government intervention into education, just a quick announcement. We've shared the feedback form. Apologies, we had shared the registration form by mistake earlier. Apologies for that. So we've shared the correct feedback form. It's also available on my center. You can go and fill up the feedback form there. But just as you know, I'll again recap what's said in terms of what the content of the Western system of education was. Now we saw how it was brought about by Christian missionaries, and how it was closely linked to their evangelical practice, and how they were trying to convert Nigerians into Christianity, and how the first girls' school was established in 1858. So we've just seen all of that. Now the fundamental base on which the Western system of education in Nigeria, or was brought about by the missionaries, was built. It's very similar. It's almost comparable to the Islamic system of education, which was brought about by the Arab merchants. It's comparable because the bases on which they operate were fundamentally similar. They wanted to evangelize and convert people into and bring people into their own fold, and that was the base of both the systems of education. But the Western education system, it believed that that could be done in some ways, as missionaries in India had said, that could be brought about only by providing formal education to Nigerians, and that became that became the base on which the education system was built. And the education, as I said, the system was completely free. It was no fee was charged anywhere, and the entire course and curriculum, it was in English, and students were required to study in English, and those students who did well, they were considered for higher education. I'm not sure of the terms. I shouldn't use a wrong term here, but they were considered for higher education. So that was a quick recap of what Sir said. Yeah.
so I think this with this one, now that after we have discussed Islamic, we talked about Western, and lastly, this now comes to the government itself, which is exactly what is in practice to date.
Yep. Yep.
Immediately after the missionaries, there were missionary schools here and there that were established in various cities, in various states, both up north and down south. But majority of these missionary schools are mostly rampant in the southern parts, because the Christians, they mostly trained their children more on the Western educational practice, while the up north, the northerners, believe on the Islamic education. They don't much practice the Western education. Now that government now comes in, so decades after the introduction of Western education then remained under the control of Christian missionaries, as usual. But government was unwilling to participate in the system, in part or in total. So the sources of funding for the mission schools mainly came from the donation from the groups and individuals outside the country, including local Christians and parents who were later paying for their children. The bulk of the contributions were from the grants from the main missions abroad. So in the year 1877, however, government decided to give unconditional grants to the mission schools, which was used only to proliferate mushroom schools in villages. Thus, the condition of the schools remained bad. So there was acute shortage of teaching and learning facilities. The blackboards, chalks, and slates were in short supply, and the primer were largely religious tracts or information or related to local background. So arising from the petition of the Secretary of State for the Colonies, Gold Coast Colony, of which Lagos was part thereof, a bill for the promotion and assistance of education was passed into law. So the provision of the bill provided the basis for the establishment of the general and local boards of education, each with its power. It also categorized schools into public and assisted schools. The former being financed squarely by public funds, and the later assisted, granted, aided from the public funds as well. The bill approved the freedom of parents concerning the religious freedom of their children, specified how the grants should be used, which were mainly for school buildings and payment of teachers' salary. So the conditions for the eligibility of the grants were also spelled out. They included efficient managerial control, attendance of children in such schools, and the examination results in specified subjects. Other provisions of the bill provided for the appointment of an inspector, special grants to industrial schools, admission of indigent children into government and public schools, and grants to training colleges and institutions for teachers. So in the year 1877, an education ordinance for the colony of Lagos came into being. Provision of the ordinance laid down some principles which became foundation of the education laws for Nigerians. And a careful examination of the ordinance was revealed, and the re-echoing of the provision of these 1877 provisions and the intention of government to participate with the missionaries as partners in the provision of education to Nigeria. So the years 1889 to 1906 witnessed gradual development of dual education in which government participated more and more alongside the missionaries in providing education in Nigeria. This experience helped immensely in the administration and management of education later in the colony and the protectorate of the southern Nigeria. Not only had the number of schools increased during the period, the curriculum of the schools also became diversified to include subjects like geography, history, the Yoruba language, drawing, sewing for girls. Others include Latin, Greek, mathematics, photography, bookkeeping, botany, chemistry, physics, French, physiology, nominal history, to mention a few. And this
Sure.
ordinance of the year 1877 became reinforced by another ordinance exclusively made by Nigeria for the Southern Protectorate in the year 1886. So the provision of the ordinance spells out in clear terms the duties and responsibility of each party nation as a stakeholder. And the provision of this ordinance, we have an ordinance, a kind of a law. So I don't think we
I think
need to
we're
do
almost out of
that
time.
one. But there an ordinance
We're
was proposed.
sorry to button, sir, but we're almost out of time. So just in the interest of time, we thought that we'll just call it a day. It's 6 already. I mean, we definitely
Yes.
wanted to get into more details and understand the nitty gritties, but unfortunately we just have an hour and we had to just complete everything in it. So of course while we were not able to cover everything, we tried to of course the idea, as I said at the beginning, was of doing the session was, we've done 55 sessions prior to this, but none of them had an I mean, I wouldn't say none of them, but I mean, a very limited number of sessions with, had what we call an international aspect to it. It brought us in contact with, what's happening outside there, outside India, and that was the idea behind, doing such a session. So, and that's the reason which I reached out to Mr. Saeed, and as I said, Mr. Saeed is an active member of my center. He's been attending all our sessions since May, and he had very graciously accepted to do this session for us. And and that's how this whole session came about. And so just a quick recap of what we covered in the session. We talked about the traditional system of education in Nigeria, broadly four buckets. We talked about the traditional system of education in Nigeria and other African societies, how they were functional in nature, how they focused on individuals acquiring the correct values and skills to exist in the society and live in peace and harmony. So that was the traditional system of education. Then we went a little bit into the Islamic system of education, which is once again a very prominent system of education in Nigeria. And apologies, there's a parker at my side. And how that was brought into northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria, and so that was through the Arab traders who came in and brought the Islamic system of education with them. Then we spoke a little bit about the Western system of education in Nigeria, which was brought about by Christian missionaries whose aims were very similar to the Arab traders who came in, but the Christian missionaries came much later, and with the home aim of evangelizing and converting Nigerians, and they brought about their own system of education. And then at last, we also spoke. Sir also mentioned a little bit about the government system of education, and which is the most modern system of education. How it was brought about after 1919. He spoke, of course, about the elementary and primary system of education, of course, but because we don't have time, we couldn't get into the secondary system of education, which, as I understand, was the government put in a lot of effort. There were a few problems which cropped up, in this, specifically in the primary system of education, and the linkage between primary and secondary system of education, and that led the governments in Nigeria to bring about a lot of reforms in the secondary education space. But unfortunately, we are out of time, so I'm not sure if we can cover all of that. But thank you once again for joining us on this Friday evening. Usually our sessions happen on Thursdays, but because Sir had a personal emergency yesterday, we had to move the session to today. But I'm sure that all of you who attended the session may have found something useful to learn. I certainly did when I was reading up for the session. I certainly came across a lot of useful resources, and we'd love to share those resources with you as well. And I'm hoping that all of you attended the session today found something or the other useful, and few tidbits of information, and something which was enough to make your Friday evening worthwhile. Thank you once again for joining us. Thanks a lot, Sir. Wonderful having you with us. It always gives us great pleasure when someone from the community comes forward and does a session for us. So it was thanks a lot for that. And I'm sure all the teachers who were there, they really liked the session. And so just before we part for the day, just before we call it a day today, as always, the feedback form has been shared multiple times in the chat section. So please fill that in, and we'll issue you your certificate of participation by noon tomorrow. So please fill that feedback form in. And it's also available on my center, by the way, in case you are having trouble filling the feedback form from the live chat section. So which is m.center.org from your mobile browser, the same place that you used to register for the session. And so that's the customary message. But next week we will be back with the next couple of sessions are also again going to be very special. Of course, we have a session on 4th of March, which is going to be an augmented reality, and that promises to be an exciting session. And I'm sure that all of us here we'll have something new to learn there. So that session is going to happen on 4th March. The next session is actually which is happening next Thursday, which is I think 26th, if I'm not wrong. That session is going to be a special one. It's going to be different from all our webinars that we've done thus far. It's actually going to be a lot more interactive. It's actually going to be one of our teammates who is leading, the learning resources at my center. So she's going to be there in the session, and she's actually going to be discussing, or rather, she's going to be solving a few questions with you, and she's going to be, of course, discussing with you the thought process behind those questions, and the correct answer, and how do we arrive at the correct answer. So that's going to be the theme of next week's session. The registrations will open up on my center tomorrow, so please go ahead, and you'll of course be notified as always by email and SMS. So please keep an eye on that, and I will see you next Thursday, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Until then, I hope all of you have a wonderful week ahead. And yeah, thank you, thanks a lot, sir.